Ghost of Yōtei impresses with its visuals and atmosphere, but not everything is perfect. Even as one of the most remarkable experiences in the genre, there are still areas that need to evolve for the game to reach its true potential. I'm Matthew, and today I'm going to talk about 7 things that Ghost of Yōtei still needs to improve. I have to admit I was disappointed with the evolution of side missions and parallel activities. Sucker Punch promised that we wouldn't be repeating the same tasks indefinitely, but unfortunately the structure of the Tales of Ezo follows a very familiar pattern. I arrive at a location, investigate some clues, follow tracks or the wind to a camp, and resolve everything with combat. In the first few hours this works well, but after 15 or 20 missions like this the formula becomes too obvious. I was hoping for more variety in objectives, perhaps some environmental puzzles, more elaborate investigation missions, or challenges that didn't rely so heavily on combat. The game had the potential to innovate more in this aspect. An issue that bothered me quite a bit was the lack of visible consequences from my actions in the world. I spent time helping villages, defeating faction leaders, and liberating entire regions. But when I return to these places, everything remains practically the same. NPCs don't significantly acknowledge my achievements. I don't see improvements in the villages I saved, nor changes in the dynamics of the areas I liberated. I would have liked to have seen a more responsive system where my presence truly shaped the state of the world. This would make the side missions more rewarding and give the feeling that I am truly making a difference in Atsu's journey, not just checking boxes on a list. The mythical tales have a beautiful presentation with the Sumi paintings and the shamisen narratives, but I confess I expected more in the execution. The structure is very similar between them. I visit a few marked locations, face enemies along the way, and conclude with a duel. I would be much more satisfied if each mythical tale brought truly unique mechanics, such as bosses with completely different attack patterns that required specific strategies, or challenging platforming sections that better utilized Atsu's enhanced parkour. The abilities I unlock are useful, but the path to obtaining them could be more memorable and varied. The open-world activities like hot springs, shrines, and contemplation spots remain quite passive. Basically, you locate the spot, interact, and receive the reward. I understand that these activities serve to create moments of pause and appreciation of the environment, but I feel they could have an additional layer of interactivity. Perhaps small observation challenges, simple mini-games, or contextual riddles that would make me engage more actively with these locations. As they are, they end up becoming an automatic routine during exploration, without much meaning beyond the statistical benefits they offer. The companion missions have good narrative arcs and help me get to know the secondary characters better, but mechanically they are very similar to each other. The vast majority culminate in combat, regardless of the character's personality or specialization. It would be interesting if each companion brought a different gameplay style reflecting their abilities. Pure stealth missions with an assassin, strategic challenges with a tactician, or investigation based on dialogue with other NPCs. This would diversify the experience and make each character journey more unique and memorable, instead of all following the same template. Collecting the 311 collectibles scattered across the map is a time-consuming task, even with tools like the shamisen songs and the Sidorenu outfits to help. What makes me a little discouraged is that many of these rewards don't seem as impactful as the effort required to obtain them. Cosmetics are cool for customization, but many charms and small upgrades end up not making much practical difference. I would be more motivated to complete these objectives if the rewards were more substantial. Perhaps unique gear pieces with unique benefits, special horses, or access to secret areas with additional content. What makes me most reflective is that Ghost of Yōtei had an excellent opportunity to refine and expand the formula established in Tsushima, but chose to stay too close to the original. The Hokkaido setting is absolutely stunning. The combat has evolved satisfactorily, and the main story is engaging. But the parallel activities did not keep up with this evolution. Some critics mentioned that certain mechanics seem a bit dated by current standards, and I partially agree. I'm not saying the game is bad, far from it, but I feel there was room for more innovation in side missions, more robust consequence systems, and greater variety in open-world activities. Even so, it is a worthwhile experience. I just expected a bigger leap compared to its predecessor. Although the combat is visually spectacular and satisfying at many moments, I feel that the decision to remove the stance system and replace it with multiple weapons created more problems than solutions. The idea of having 5 different weapons, katana, dual katanas, yari, spear, kusarigama, And Odachi seems great on paper, but in practice it turns into a constant game of rock, paper, scissors where you need to constantly switch weapons based on the type of enemy in front of you. In the first few hours this works well and is even exciting to try out each weapon, but after dozens of combats, the mechanic becomes repetitive and tiring. Instead of deeply mastering one or two favorite weapons, you are constantly reminded to switch to the correct weapon, breaking the rhythm and immersion. What bothers me most is that this constant weapon switching prevents me from truly developing mastery with any of them. Each weapon has its own skill tree with special techniques, but since I need to keep alternating between all of them during larger combats, I end up not fully utilizing what each one offers. I unlocked several abilities for the Kusarigama and Yari that I rarely use because, in the heat of battle against mixed groups of enemies, I'm too busy managing which weapon to use against which type of opponent. The stance system of the first game allowed you to specialize while keeping your katana and only changing the style, which felt more fluid and natural. Here the feeling is of juggling equipment instead of perfecting techniques. The parry system also left something to be desired in some aspects. The attacks signaled with the blue glow are extremely difficult to parry correctly because the visual indicator is often hard to see, especially during quick katana attacks or when multiple enemies attack simultaneously. Instead of using the blue glow as a reference, you need to intensely focus on the enemy's animation and time the parry exactly when the attack is about to land. This would be acceptable if the enemies didn't have hyper armor, but they do. It's frustrating when I'm in the middle of a combo and the enemy simply ignores my hits, initiates a special attack with super armor, and steamrolls me. Some boss fights become especially tiring when they repeat the same attacks multiple times in a row, making the combat more a matter of patience than skill. Group combats, especially on higher difficulties, reveal the system's limitations. When you are surrounded by 10 or 15 enemies with different types of weapons, the experience becomes too chaotic. You need to identify which enemy to use which weapon on, switch quickly while managing your defense, and also remember which abilities are available for each weapon. The game offers the shifting strike ability, which allows a quick heavy attack immediately after switching weapons. But even this doesn't solve the fundamental problem. The combat turns into an exercise in menu management instead of a fluid sword dance. I would like there to be more flexibility, where each weapon was viable in more situations, allowing choices based on personal preference and not on obligation. The build system also seems underutilized due to this forced switching mechanic. Theoretically, you can assemble specialized builds focusing on certain armor and abilities that complement a specific playstyle, such as stealth with chain assassinations and kunais, or direct combat focusing on perfect parries. But since the game constantly pushes you to use all weapons to be efficient, these builds never reach their full potential. I tried to make a build focused on Kusarigama for crowd control, but in any encounter with spear or shield enemies, I was forced to abandon my strategy and switch to other weapons. This makes the progression system less satisfying, as your customization choices matter less than simply having access to all weapons and knowing when to switch. The learning curve for memorizing the advantage system between weapons is also unnecessarily steep. You need to remember that katana beats dual katanas beat spears, spears beat kusarigama beats shields, and odachi is special for brutes. Some players created mnemonic systems, like associating the triangle, spear button, with the sharp tip that keeps dagger enemies distant, or the circle, kusarigama, with the circular movement against shields. But the fact that we need to create complex mental systems just to remember which weapon to use shows that the design could be more intuitive. In Tsushima, the stances were easier to internalize and did not break the combat flow in the same way. Despite these criticisms, I recognize that the combat in Ghost of Yōtei has brilliant moments. The brutality of the animations, the feeling of weight of the attacks, and the introduction of mechanics like disarming enemies and using their own weapons against them are excellent additions. The improved standoff system that allows you to eliminate multiple enemies or even use the Tanzutsu pistol is fantastic. Secondary tools like Metsubushi, smoke bombs, and the companion wolf add tactical variety. But I feel that the decision to force the player to use all 5 weapons instead of letting them specialize limited the system's depth. Sucker Punch confirmed that technically, you can play the entire game with 1 or 2 favorite weapons if you want. But the drastically reduced efficiency makes this seem more like a punishment than a valid playstyle choice. The decision to completely remove the focused listening ability we had in Tsushima seems to have been made in the name of realism, but in practice it ended up making stealth more frustrating than challenging. In Tsushima, you could press a button to highlight enemies through walls and plan your infiltration in advance. In Yōtei, you need to rely only on natural visual and auditory clues, which would be interesting if the enemy AI and the camp design were adjusted to compensate for this change. Unfortunately, they were not. The listen ability that Atsu eventually learns arrives too late in the story, during the mission in Teshio Ridge pursuing Kitsune, and even then, it is much more limited than the original focused listening. What bothers me most is the inconsistency in enemy detection. The adversary AI in Ghost of Yōtei still suffers from the same problems as Tsushima. Enemies frequently fail to notice a figure dressed in black crouching on a low roof literally above them, but sometimes detect you instantly in situations where you should be well hidden. The lack of a dynamic lighting system like the one implemented in Assassin's Creed Shadows is particularly disappointing. Games like Shadows allow you to extinguish lanterns with shurikens to create shadow areas and have a real-time visibility meter showing how detectable you are. In Yōtei, detection is purely based on the enemy's direct line of sight, without any consideration for darkness or weather conditions, despite the game taking place in Hokkaido with frequent snowstorms that should naturally favor stealth. A frustrating limitation that persists from the first game is the inability to assassinate brutes and enemy leaders without first unlocking specific abilities. When you stealthily approach a large enemy, the critical attack prompt appears. But instead of a silent assassination, you only injure the enemy, who immediately alerts the entire camp. To truly eliminate these targets stealthily, you need to unlock Brute Assassination and Slaughter Leader in the Assassination skill tree. I understand that this serves as character progression, but it is too artificial. Why would Atsu, an experienced warrior, initially be unable to slit the throat of an unsuspecting leader? This forces you to completely avoid these high-value enemies in the first few hours of the game, or risk alerting everyone, which goes against the very essence of stealth gameplay. The variety of stealth tools also leaves something to be desired. While the game offers kunais, blinding powder, smoke bombs, and even sake bottles to distract enemies, these tools are not as integrated or necessary for stealth gameplay as they should be. Most successful infiltrations come down to waiting for patrols to pass, assassinating isolated enemies, and using tall grass or rooftops to hide. There is no truly deep environmental manipulation system. You cannot, for example, drop heavy objects on enemies, create elaborate traps, or use the environment in creative ways beyond the basic. Distractions with sake bottles work, visually highlighting the enemy who will investigate. But it is an extremely simplistic mechanic compared to what other modern stealth games offer. The stealth skill system, while functional, seems less rewarding than the direct combat path. Chain Assassination allows you to eliminate multiple enemies in sequence, and Wolf Assassination uses your companion wolf for an additional assassination, which is satisfying when it works. Killer's Instinct provides real-time warnings about potential detections during eliminations. But even with all these abilities unlocked, stealth never reaches the level of strategic depth it should. You cannot, for example, drag bodies to hide evidence. Dead enemies remain visible indefinitely, and other guards will eventually find them, but this system is inconsistent. Sometimes they go into full alert, other times they simply ignore their comrade's corpse. This inconsistency makes it difficult to plan more elaborate infiltrations. The design of enemy camps also does not favor creative stealth approaches. Most follow very similar layouts with predictable patrol patterns and few interesting alternative paths. I would have liked to have seen more verticality utilizing Atsu's enhanced parkour, with multiple routes across rooftops, underground tunnels, or alternative entrances that rewarded careful exploration. Instead, most camps have a flat structure with some low roofs and scattered tall grass. There are no environmental events you can explore, such as causing a fire in a supply depot to create confusion or releasing caged animals as a distraction. The dynamic Hokkaido weather with its snowstorms should offer unique opportunities for stealth, hiding during storms, leaving fewer tracks in the fresh snow. But these weather mechanics are purely cosmetic. What perhaps disappoints me the most is that the game itself seems to recognize that direct combat is more fun and rewarding than stealth. The improved standoff ability, the option to call your wolf with the shamisen, and the generally better rewards for facing enemies directly make playing stealthily seem like a suboptimal choice. I spent 33 hours in the game, and honestly, after the first few regions I stopped trying stealth approaches because combat is simply more fluid, exciting, and less frustrating. Sucker Punch created an exceptional combat system, but this ended up completely overshadowing stealth. Players who wanted to focus on the ghost aspect of the experience are left with superficial mechanics and inconsistent AI, while those who choose the direct warrior path have access to much more polished and satisfying systems. For a game whose title emphasizes the concept of being a ghost, stealth should be equally viable and rewarding, but unfortunately, it is not. Although it is a visually stunning game with solid mechanics, the number of technical issues I faced throughout my more than 40 hours of gameplay was frustrating. The fact that Sucker Punch released the game requiring a day 1 patch immediately followed by another, and then 3 more updates in just 2 weeks, shows that the game clearly needed more polish time before launch. I experienced random crashes on at least 5 different occasions, usually during critical moments like important missions or when I was exploring remote mountainous areas. Losing 20 minutes of progress because the game unexpectedly decided to close completely breaks the immersion that Sucker Punch worked so hard to create. Performance issues were also more common than I would like to admit, especially during intense combat with many enemies on screen. Although performance mode theoretically delivers stable 60 FPS, I noticed perceptible frame rate drops in chaotic battles with more than 10 adversaries, particularly when visual effects like snow, wind, and dust particles were active simultaneously. The quality mode at 30 FPS is generally more stable, but occasionally presents stuttering in densely populated areas or when the game loads new map sections. Even on the PS5 Pro, which supposedly offers the smoothest experience with the ray tracing performance mode at 40 FPS, I still encountered occasional micro freezes. Considering that this is a PS5 exclusive optimized for specific hardware, I expected impeccable performance in all situations. A particularly irritating bug I faced was related to gambling in taverns. In Hiranui's Rest, the coins literally disappeared as soon as they touched the table, making it impossible to play. Even worse, the Red Crane Inn was completely empty of NPCs after I had completed a mission there previously. No players, no vendors, just a ghost hall. I tried loading previous saves and restarting the game, but the problem persisted until it was finally fixed in patch 1009. During this period, I lost complete access to these parallel activities and the exclusive items that the vendors offered. Bugs that block content in this way are especially frustrating because they prevent you from experiencing parts of the game you paid for. Audio problems, although less frequent, also hindered my experience at times. Occasionally, dialogue during cutscenes was abruptly cut off or echoed strangely, especially in enclosed environments like caves and temples. On some occasions, the ambient soundtrack simply stopped playing, leaving only sounds of footsteps and combat, which made exploration silent and lifeless. Considering that the sound design of Ghost of Yōtei was praised by many critics as spectacular, especially when played with quality headsets, these glitches, even if rare, stand out even more when they happen. Fortunately, patch 1.010 mentioned fixes for audio-related issues, so apparently I was not the only one to encounter these flaws. The pop-in of textures and environmental objects is another problem that bothered me, especially in a game that encourages exploration and photography through photo mode. Trees frequently appeared suddenly as I approached, and terrain details like rocks and vegetation visibly materialized a few meters away. The Day 1 patch allegedly fixed lower levels of detail on various tree assets to prevent visual popping, but the problem still persists on a smaller scale. Floating objects also appeared occasionally. I saw bushes suspended in the air, and on one memorable occasion, an NPC partially buried in the ground, with only the upper half of the body visible. Some players also reported low-quality textures on the ground and cliffs that look like low PC graphics settings, which is strange for a console exclusive. The black screen when starting the game was a problem I faced right at launch. In the first 48 hours after the game was available, there were moments when starting Ghost of Yōtei resulted in a completely black screen with audio playing in the background, but no visuals. I had to completely restart my PS5 twice before the game finally loaded correctly. Other players reported similar problems related to corrupted data, problematic cache, or conflicts with external storage. The temporary solution that worked for me was to move the game from my external SSD to the PS5's internal storage, which suggests there are optimization problems for playing through external devices. For a game that occupies more than 70 gigabytes of space, being forced to keep it on the limited internal SSD is inconvenient. One of the most frustrating problems is the artistic design of the map, which prioritizes aesthetics over functionality. Sucker Punch clearly wanted the map to look like a Sumie painting that Atsu gradually completes, which is a beautiful idea conceptually, but in practice it makes it extremely difficult to quickly locate specific places. The icons blend with the artistic background, especially after you complete the activities and they are marked with an X and become even more faded. In Tsushima, there was a perfect balance between visual beauty and functional interface. Here, it seems the team completely sacrificed usability in favor of aesthetics. Equipment management also becomes progressively more tedious as you advance in the game, with 5 types of melee weapons, long-range weapons, multiple armor sets with different focuses, dozens of charms divided into major and minor in 6 different categories: melee, ranged, defense, stealth, utility, onryo, in addition to helmets, masks, weapon kits, dyes, and equipment for the horse and shamisen. The inventory quickly becomes a mess. The filtering system is insufficient to handle this quantity of items. When I'm trying to find a specific stealth charm among the more than 50 charms I've collected, there is no efficient way to sort or filter beyond the basic categories. The interface does not show adequate side-by-side comparisons, forcing you to memorize statistics or repeatedly switch between menus. The loadout system that allows you to save up to 5 different equipment configurations is a good idea in theory, but poorly implemented in practice. You can save armor, dyes, and weapon kits in each loadout, which is useful when you want to switch between a direct combat build and a stealth build. However, the process of configuring and switching between loadouts is not intuitive. The menu does not clearly explain what is included in each loadout, and there is no option to rename the slots, so you end up with loadout 1, loadout 2, and need to manually remember which is which. Furthermore, switching loadouts does not automatically change the equipped charms, which need to be manually altered every time. This makes the system only partially useful, as half of your build configuration still requires manual navigation through the menus. The lack of detailed contextual information in the upgrade menus is another problematic point. When I'm at the Blacksmith Father's Forge trying to improve my melee weapons, or talking to Ran the Archer to improve the bow and firearm, or with Genji the Armorer for armor, the game shows which resources are needed, but the useful tips for locating missing resources are too vague. It says something like found in forest areas, or obtained by defeating certain enemies, without specifying exact locations or enemy types. Considering that some armor has 5 upgrade levels, each requiring different and increasingly rare resources, the system could be much more transparent. Other modern games offer automatic markers on the map, or direct links to locations where resources can be found. Here you are at the mercy of random exploration or external consultations in online guides. The interactive map also presents clarity problems about the actual playable area. There are large sections displayed on the map that suggest they are explorable, but in reality are just inaccessible scenery. This lack of clear distinction between playable and non-playable areas creates false expectations, especially when you see an interesting mountain or valley on the map and spend 10 minutes trying to get there only to find it is an invisible barrier. The fact that Yōtei divides the world into distinct zones with hidden loads between them, unlike Tsushima, which was a continuous world, also affects the navigation experience. These transitions through interdimensional spaces broke my sense of exploring a cohesive island. Sucker Punch's design philosophy of maintaining a clean screen without a mini-map, aggressive markers, or yellow paint is admirable and creates incredible visual moments. Creative director Jason Connell explained that they want immersion through diegetic elements like fireflies, golden birds, and white markers on climbable surfaces. However, this minimalist approach creates usability problems in practical situations. When I'm in the middle of a complex battle and need to quickly check how many arrows I have left, or how much spirit I have, this information should be more accessible. During exploration on horseback, all HUD information disappears completely, which is beautiful for photography, but frustrating when I need to know if I'm being pursued or how long is left for an objective. Finally, the interface for hidden abilities and techniques also leaves something to be desired in terms of clarity. Some crucial abilities like Listen, the limited version of focused listening, are unlocked very late in the story and in specific circumstances that the game does not clearly signal. Other important abilities like Brute Assassination and Slaughter Leader are buried in the skill tree with no clear indication of how essential they are for effective stealth gameplay. The skill menu does not offer respec, reconfiguration of spent points, so mistaken choices made in the first few hours are permanent unless you completely restart. For a game that offers multiple viable playstyles, the lack of flexibility in the progression system and the uninformative interface of the ability menus limit experimentation and penalize players who do not consult external guides from the beginning. The implementation of mini-games and interactive activities left me disappointed in several aspects. The main mini-game, Zeni Hajiki, the coin gambling game, had the potential to be a fun distraction in taverns, but the execution is frustrating. The basic mechanic involves flicking coins onto the table with the goal of hitting the opponent's coins while keeping yours on the table. But the physics are too inconsistent. Even using the power display accessibility option that shows the force of the hit, there is an annoying randomness in the results. In some matches, the coins simply disappeared upon touching the table due to graphical bugs that were only partially corrected in patch 1.08. And even after the patches, occasionally the coins fall underneath the table or fly off unpredictably. The bamboo strikes return from Tsushima, and although they are functionally identical, memorizing and pressing button sequences while Atsu cuts bamboos, they remain just a mechanical task without depth. There are 15 locations on the map, 13 discovered through exploration, and 2 linked to the main story. The reward of permanently increasing the spirit bar is useful, especially in the first few hours, but the mini-game itself is tedious. Some sequences require you to use only the D-pad, supposedly symbolizing Atsu swinging the katana with one hand, which forces you to hold the controller uncomfortably. There is no real challenge beyond memorizing the button sequence shown on the bamboos. If you make a mistake, you can simply try again with the same combination until you get it right. The removal of haikus from the hot springs was a good decision. That mechanic in Tsushima was, as some critics pointed out, embarrassingly bad. However, what replaced it is not much better. Now you simply interact with a bucket next to the onsen, watch a brief cutscene of Atsu reflecting with generic dialogue about her journey, and receive a permanent health increase. There are 16 hot springs scattered across Ezo, and after visiting 3 or 4, the activity becomes completely automatic. There is no real interaction, no simple mini-game, no choice to make. It is literally pressing a button and watching the same animation repeatedly. The bounty hunting system is probably the most well-developed parallel activity, but it still presents repetition problems. There are 31 bounties distributed across the 5 regions, and you pick them up through boards in taverns that show 3 at a time in rotation. The basic structure is always the same. Pick up the poster, follow clues to the target's location, and eliminate the criminal in combat. Some bounties have interesting touches, like the one about the man with a kappa mask who has memorable dialogues about revenge with Atsu, or those that involve small environmental puzzles, but most come down to traveling to a camp and fighting. The rewards, coins, unique armor, masks, sword kits, are good enough to motivate completing all of them for the Master Bounty Hunter trophy, but the experience itself becomes repetitive halfway through. Ironically, the developers promised that Ghost of Yōtei would have less repetitive open-world activities than Tsushima. Co-director Nate Fox admitted that they received feedback about elements being too repetitive and monotonous, especially following foxes to shrines. He stated, "We won't make players go through the same thing repeatedly whenever their curiosity leads them to new secrets during exploration. We have prepared different types of outcomes that can go beyond the player's expectations." But in practice, this promise was not completely fulfilled. The bamboo strikes are identical to each other. The hot springs are exact copies, and even the bounties follow predictable templates. There is some variety, some bounties have twists or moral choices, but not enough to make every discovery truly unique as promised. What frustrates me the most is the wasted potential. The Hokkaido setting with its dynamic seasons, snowstorms, and varied climate could have inspired interesting contextual mini-games, archery competitions at village festivals, interactive tea ceremonies that affect negotiations, horse racing against NPCs, ice fishing during winter, or even cooperative hunting with your companion wolf. Instead, we have a buggy coin-flicking game, bamboo cutting that is pure button repetition, and hot spring baths that are glorified cutscenes. For a game that prides itself on its cultural immersion and artistic presentation, the mini-games are surprisingly shallow and disconnected from the surrounding world. I keep wondering how many hours I spent collecting charms in gambling dens when I could have been exploring or doing more meaningful missions. The basic revenge structure, Atsu creates a list with the Yōtei 6 and needs to eliminate each one of them, is clear and focused, which works well initially. But as the story progresses, it becomes evident that this narrative is much shallower thematically than Jin's journey. In Tsushima, there were complex moral dilemmas about honor versus survival, tradition versus necessity, and the consequences of abandoning the samurai code. In Yōtei, it's just pure revenge. Atsu wants to kill 6 people who destroyed her family, and that's basically it. It lacks that philosophical depth that made Jin's story so memorable. The biggest problem is the completely unbalanced narrative. The first act is excellent, well-paced, with gradual character development and solid world building. I spent so many hours exploring and doing parallel activities that I almost forgot there were more acts ahead. But acts 2 and 3 fly by in an almost disconcerting way. It's as if Sucker Punch spent the entire development budget at the beginning of the game and then needed to rush the ending. Secondary characters who seemed important are underutilized, narrative arcs are resolved too quickly, and the final confrontation with Lord Saito, which should be the emotional climax of the entire journey, seems rushed. Several players commented the same thing, that the story becomes rushed in the third act, and I completely agree. The villains, the Yōtei 6, are an especially big disappointment. The premise is interesting. 6 individuals with animal code names who participated in the massacre of Atsu's family. The game tries to give some of them nuance by showing that no one is a villain in their own story, but the execution is inconsistent. The snake, for example, is eliminated before the prologue even ends, basically functioning as a tutorial boss. Despite the menacing performance and the character's potential, he dies before having any real development. Other members like the Kitsune have interesting moments of remorse and moral complexity, but these moments are few and come too late. Most of the Yōtei 6 are just generic obstacles in Atsu's path, without memorable personalities or convincing motivations. A particularly frustrating narrative trick that the game abuses is making its targets escape at the last second repeatedly. You chase a member of the Yōtei 6 for an entire mission, finally corner them, and then something convenient happens. A distraction, a structural collapse, an intervention from allies that allows the villain to flee. This happens several times throughout the game, and each time it becomes more obvious that it is just a lazy maneuver to stretch the campaign's duration. Instead of creating genuine tension or interesting narrative complications, these forced escapes only frustrate. You feel that the story is artificially inflating your playtime, instead of earning those moments through organic development. The secondary characters and companions are also substantially weaker than in Tsushima. In Tsushima, characters like Masako, Ishikawa, Yuna, and Norio had complete and well-developed narrative arcs that intertwined with Jin's journey in significant ways. Their stories explored themes of loss, redemption, loyalty, and purpose. In Yōtei, the companions, the blacksmith father, Ran the archer, Ginji the armorer, and others, primarily exist as upgrade mechanics and quest dispensers. They have basic backstories, but none of them undergo significant transformations or have truly impactful moments. The companion missions follow the pattern of, help me with this specific problem, you complete it, and that's it. There is no sense of building deep relationships or participating in shared emotional journeys. The flashback mechanic to Atsu's past is conceptually brilliant but underutilized. In certain locations like the ruins of her childhood home, you can press a button and the screen seamlessly transitions to the past, where you play as the young Atsu experiencing the life that was stolen from her. These moments are visually stunning and emotionally potent, especially the scene of Yon's Atsu's mother, Death, being hanged while singing to comfort her daughter. But there are very few of these flashback sequences considering the mechanic's potential. I would have liked to have seen much more of Atsu's past, exploring her childhood, training, family relationships, and the traumatic event in greater depth. Instead, we receive brief fragments that leave the feeling that there is a richer story that was not fully told. What frustrates me the most is that some critics are defending this generic story by saying it is more boring than woke, as if the low narrative quality were acceptable, because at least it's not trying to make political statements. This is absurd. Ghost of Yōtei deserved a story on par with Ghost of Tsushima, regardless of who the protagonist is. Sucker Punch had 5 years to develop a complex narrative that explored Atsu's unique position as a female ronin in a male-dominated society, her search for identity beyond revenge, or moral dilemmas about how far one should go in the name of retribution. Instead, we received a predictable and linear revenge story that could have been written in any generic setting. As deserved better, and so did the players.
Stay low. The grass will hide us.
My father would not approve.
Imagine those teeth sinking into your arm.
Now you're just trying to scare me.
Is it working? Jubei!
Does she see us?
It's okay, girl. We won't hurt you.
The beast is gone, little ones. You're lucky I was here.
That noise was like thunder.
Do it again.
You two don't scare easy.
He has a katana.
Does your blade need sharpening? Our father's a swordsmith.
Your father?
Master Kengo. Have you heard of him?
Who hasn't?
We can take you to him. Just don't mention the wolf.
Your secret's safe with me.
This way. Atsu, we still need mushrooms.
We can pick some on the way.
It'll go quicker with 3 pairs of hands.
Let's spread out. Atsu, get your own mushrooms.
Yes! Let's see what...
Trust your training. Reinforcements. Never stop. You're unhappy. Good. Trust your training.
A cripple and the Onryo everyone is so afraid of. I'll put you both down.
Use your full katana. Show him what a cripple and an onryo can do. Just like the bamboo, strike hard and quick.
This one had something on him. A tiger forced up the mountain, still bears teeth, and will return twice as strong. A passcode, maybe?
There's mud on his clothes, reddish brown, like clay. These men came from Tokachi Range. There's an old fortress in the marshlands.